Hello. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Jane.
Right, bye-bye.
We're so happy that everybody is with us today, this morning, this wonderful morning, waiting to hear from Jane Goodall. Good morning, Jane. I'm going to introduce you to the audience. Hello.
I'm not very clear because I'm on the wrong laptop. We couldn't make the other one work.
That's fine. So long as you're here and we can see you and hear you, it's going to be wonderful. So I'm going to introduce you to the audience, and then I'll give you the floor. Dr. Jane Goodall is founder of the Jane Goodall Institute and a United Nations Messenger of Peace. In July 1960, at the age of 26, she traveled from England to what is now Tanzania and ventured into the little-known world of wild chimpanzees. Equipped with a notebook, binoculars, and a fascination with wildlife, Dr. Goodall braved a realm of unknowns to give the world a remarkable window into humankind's closest living relatives. Through nearly 60 years of groundbreaking work, she has not only shown us the urgent need to protect chimpanzees from extinction, she has also redefined species conservation to include the needs of local people and the environment. Today, there are 23 Jane Goodall Institutes working to support the core programs, as well as 2 sanctuaries for orphan chimpanzees and roots and shoots. Jane Goodall's Institute's environmental and humanitarian program empowers young people of all ages to become involved in hands-on projects for their community, animals, and the environment in more than 65 countries. We are very happy to have you with us. The floor is yours, Jane. Go ahead, and you can tell me whenever you want me to play your videos.
Okay. All right. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to this conference. And I'm sorry I look a little bit fuzzy-muzzy because it's the wrong laptop. We had big problems joining you. And I really need to go back to the beginning because I was born loving animals. And I was very fortunate in having a supportive mother. And she's right here. She's always with me. She's the one who supported my love of animals. And she didn't get mad when I took earthworms to bed. She just said, "Oh, Jane, you were so intent. I think you were wondering, how do they walk without legs?" Because I was only 1.5. And then she did get mad at me, even though they'd had to call the police. They'd lost me. And I was hiding in a hen house to see where the egg came out of the hen because I couldn't see a big enough hole. So it was during the war that I grew up, World War II. So there was no television back then. I learned from books and nature, and I spent a lot of time outside and as long as I could reading books about animals. So I was 10 years old when my dream began. I will go to Africa, live with wild animals, and write books about them. Everybody laughed at me. How would I do that? I was just a girl, and Africa was far away, and we didn't have money. Very, very little money. My father was off in the war. And so they told me to dream about something I could achieve, except my mother. And she said, if you really want to do something like this, then you're going to have to work awfully hard, take advantage of every opportunity. And then if you don't give up, maybe you find a way. And that's the message I take to young people around the world, particularly in disadvantaged communities. And I wish Mom was alive to know how many people have come up and said, "Jane, thank you. You taught me because you did it. I can do it too." So to cut the long story short, I got invited to Africa by a friend, saved up money working as a waitress, got out there, was lucky enough to meet the famous Dr. Louis Leakey, the paleontologist, anthropologist. And I think he was impressed by how much I knew about animals, even though I'd never been to university because we couldn't afford it. And he gave me a job as his assistant. And then that led to him offering me the opportunity to go out and study the chimpanzees. Well, nobody had done it. There was no protocol for me to follow. So I just did what I'd done as a child, sitting patiently, watching, and believing that eventually the chimpanzees would accept me. It took a long time. And I was really worried. There was only money for 6 months. And weeks became months, and still the chimps ran away whenever they saw this peculiar white ape. But eventually, one of them got used to me, And he it was that I saw using and making tools. He was fishing for termites with straws and biting them off, stripping leaves from twigs to make a tool. That was the breakthrough, because at that time science, Western science, thought that humans and only humans used and made tools. And Leakey was able to bring in the National Geographic Society, and it was the Geographic that decided they would continue to fund the research, and even more important, or just as important, they sent a photographer, cameraman to document what I was learning, because by this time, many of the chimps had accepted me. Well, when the first news went back to Western science, the scientists said, but why should we believe what she says? She hasn't been to university and she's just a girl. So they discounted it. But once Hugo's film started circulating by the Geographic, and they printed articles that I'd written detailing this behavior, and, you know, the amazing thing is how like us they are. So if they're communicating with posture and gesture, kissing, embracing, holding hands, patting one another, begging with hand outstretched for food, males competing for dominance, swaggering, bunching their lips, making themselves look as big and dangerous as they possibly can, just like some human male politicians that I know of. And it was a shock to find that they're capable of violence and a kind of primitive war, but they're also capable of love, compassion, and real altruism. So they have the two sides of human nature. Well, it became more and more obvious as I watched mothers and their offspring, saw the relationship between family members, watched males competing for a position in the hierarchy, that there wasn't a sharp line dividing us from them. But when Leakey told me I had to get a degree, and that there was no time for an undergraduate degree, and he'd got me a place in Cambridge University to do a PhD in ethology, and I didn't even know what ethology was, and there was no Googling in those days. You know, it was handwritten letters, or if it was very urgent, it was a telegram. Well, it's just studying behavior. But anyway, I got to Cambridge and I was nervous. You can imagine, I hadn't been to university. So imagine how I felt when many of the professors told me I'd done everything wrong, that I shouldn't have given the chimpanzees names. They should have had numbers. That was scientific.
Oh, my gosh.
I couldn't talk about them having personalities, minds, or emotions, because those were unique to us. Well, fortunately, another individual I keep closely with me was my childhood teacher. And I spent hours and hours with him. And I knew the professors were wrong, that we're not the only beings with personality, mind, and emotion. So I stood up to them. And I did have a wonderful professor. And I did learn how to think and write as a scientist. And I was strong enough, because of Rusty and my mother, to say, no, when they told me that I couldn't have empathy with the chimps, I got to be cold and objective. I said, no, this is wrong. Because if you have empathy and you see a behavior which you can't quite understand, and then you think, I think I know, I think that's how I would behave, then you can sit back as a scientist and examine whether your hunch is right. Mm-hmm. So anyhow, I got my PhD and I went back to Gombe in Tanzania and built up a little research station. I mean, Gombe's a very small national park, so just a few students. And they were the best days of my life. I spent time out in the rainforest. I learned how everything was interconnected, how each little species has a role to play. And why did I leave this most amazing time of my life? Because in 1986, I helped put together a conference, and by then there were 7 different field sites studying chimps. Mm-hmm. And we wanted to learn how chimp behavior differed from place to place, and is there something like culture, which there is. But we had a session on conservation, and it was shocking. And right across Africa, forests were going and chimpanzee numbers were decreasing. And I felt, well, it's necessary for me to go and see for myself, because I don't think you can talk about something until you have some first-hand experience. So I learned a lot about the problems facing the chimps, the habitat destruction, shooting mothers to capture babies to sell them overseas as pets or for circuses. Very, very cruel. Being caught in snares set by hunters for pigs and antelopes, losing hand or foot or dying. And human populations expanding, so degradation of the land. But at the same time as I was learning all this, I was also learning about the plight of so many of the people living in and around chimpanzee habitat, the crippling poverty, the lack of good health and education, the degradation of their farmland. And it came to a head when I flew over the tiny Gombe National Park. And what had been there was an equatorial forest belt right across Africa when I began in 1960, almost unbroken, chimpanzee ranging right across. But when I flew over Gombe in 1990, I was shocked to see it was just a very small patch of forest surrounded by completely bare hills, more people living there than the land could support, too poor to buy food from elsewhere, struggling to survive. And that's when it hit me. If we don't do something to help these people find ways of making a living without destroying the environment, because when you're very poor, you destroy the environment in your desperation to grow more food or make charcoal. You've got to support your family. And so the Jane Goodall Institute began its program, Take Care, or Takari as we call it. And it's our method of community-based conservation. It was way out ahead of its time, really. And I won't go into detail, but it's very holistic. And it's now in 104 villages throughout the whole chimp range in Tanzania. And each of the 104 villages provides one or two volunteers, and they go to workshops and they learn how to use smartphones, and they monitor the health of their forest reserves, which is where most of the chimps are, unprotected. So in our program, we also get scholarships to keep girls in school during and after puberty and try and get them into higher education. It's been shown all around the world as women's education improves, family size tends to drop. And this is the huge problem in this part of Tanzania. And we provide family planning information, which is very well received. And perhaps one of the most important things, microcredit programs, so that groups can take out tiny loans for environmentally sustainable projects. Now the people understand, A, that they need the forest for their own future, for clean air and water and regulating temperature and rainfall. B, that protecting the environment isn't just benefiting wildlife, but their own future. And so they've become our partners in conservation. And that program is growing in 6 other African countries where we work with chimps. And then the final bit, you mentioned the Roots and Shoots program. I was traveling around the world raising awareness about these things, trying to raise money too, because it takes money. And I kept meeting young people, high school, university, who seemed not to have much hope for the future. And they were depressed. They were angry. Most of them just apathetic. And I asked you, why do you feel like this? Well, you've compromised our future and there's nothing we can do about it. And we have. You hear, I don't know if you hear over there, but we're always hearing, we haven't inherited this planet from our ancestors. We've borrowed it from our children. But we haven't borrowed, we've stolen, and we're still stealing today. So when they said there was nothing they could do about it, I thought, no, you're wrong. We still have a window of time. And so Roots and Shoots is about young people getting together, talking about the things they care about, working out what they can do, rolling up their sleeves and taking action. And the only important thing is that they must choose between them as a group, a project to help people a project to help animals, a project to help the environment because of this interconnection. And we now have programs in 68 countries. We've got members in kindergarten, university, everything in between, even some adult groups. And, so we're spreading all across China, we're all across North America, growing in South America, across Europe, growing in the Middle East. And these young people are changing the world. It's my greatest reason for hope. And the last thing I'll say, and then maybe you want to ask me some questions, but what I will say is that this pandemic that is so disrupting the whole world, the economy, people losing their jobs, their lives, their loved ones, really everything is getting disrupted. But it's our fault. We brought it on ourselves. It's been predicted by scientists studying these zoonotic diseases. Most new diseases are a virus or a bacteria jumping from an animal to a person, and sometimes then creating a new disease like COVID-19. And it's our disrespect of the environment, destroying forests, forcing animals in closer contact with people, shooting them, killing them, eating them, creating conditions that are perfect for a virus to jump over. And then we're trafficking them. We're sending them overseas, many of them ending up in the Asian wild meat markets. And there is a perfect situation for a virus to jump over because it's very cruel. Tiny little wire cages the animals are shoved in from different parts of Asia, but from Africa too. They're frightened. It's unhygienic. Blood, urine, feces can contaminate the seller or the buyer. And that's what happened in a meat market in China, we think, with this COVID-19. But HIV started from chopping up chimpanzees in Africa. And MERS started in the Middle East from domestic camels. And it's the factory farms, where we breed animals to eat. Pigs and the cows and the chickens and the turkeys, they too provide horrible conditions. And there too, viruses and bacteria have quite frequently jumped over. So almost all our new diseases come from animals, and it's our fault. We've created the environment where this can easily happen. So we just pray that after this pandemic, as we've come back to face the reality of the climate crisis, which was caused by the same disrespect of nature, that we can get together and create a new green economy and have a different standard for what is success in life. Must it be just acquiring money and wealth and status, or can it be acquiring a life where you can be happy, where you can help others, where you can raise a family and educate them and get joy out of life, not spend all the time desperately trying to raise or hang on to or increase your wealth. So that's the big hope, so that we don't go back to, polluted skies and dirty water, but the way we look around the world today and look at the political systems, I don't know. It's going to be very hard work to get a new kind of way of thinking.
Absolutely. We couldn't agree with you more on all the points that you brought up. So before we start with the questions, shall I show the video? Would you like me to show you
Can we, just the last video, but can we show it at the end of the questions? Because I want people to go away thinking about it.
Okay, perfect.
I think you have two. It's the last of whatever you have.
Oh, no, I have three. I have one introduction, one middle, and one end. So just put the end at the end.
And it's 4 minutes. So
all
if
right.
we can stop 4 minutes before I have to and show that video.
Perfect. We will do that. So I'm going to start with a few questions to you, and then we'll take questions from the audience and take a group selfie, and then we'll put the video and end. Well, first of all, I grew up reading about you and following you wherever you went. So you were an inspiration to many people across the globe. So I want to thank you. Thank you personally. I mean, just to be with you on this interview is kind of a dream come true. Somebody growing up to see their favorite person. And I think the thing is to set who are our celebrities. Well, you're my celebrity. And I think that's what we want to change in youth, that their celebrities are scientists, are people who take care of nature. And that's how you change how youth are. So thank you very much. And I also want to share this love of animals and nature that many young people tend to forget and don't connect with people moving into cities. They're losing that connection with nature, and especially animals. And you mentioned patience and just watching and observing patiently. Those are wonderful and very important qualities that we need to foster in our children growing up.
You do.
Yes. So you touched on so many important things, and I want to ask a question about. Would you share with us a story of who's your favorite chimpanzee? I mean, it's like they're your friends. So who's your best friend? And share how you got to know her or him, and yeah. Would you share with us that?
The all-time favorite, and it's not quite like a friend, it's almost a friend. It's different from a human friend, and it's different from a pet. I mean, it's more like you go off and you find a tribe of indigenous people that's never been contacted, and you get so that they accept you, and maybe you become friends, but maybe it's just an acceptance. But anyway, I felt he was my friend. I don't suppose he thought I was his, but at least he trusted me. And that was the very first one, David Greybeard, who allowed me to see him using and making tools, which was the breakthrough observation. But then there was also, and David, by the way, he was very handsome, and he was calm, he was gentle. He wasn't the alpha dominant male, but he was a leader. In other words, the other chimps liked him. He was quick to reassure a young one or a female who was in trouble. So he had a following, and he was best friends with the top-ranking male. So he had a very special position. But then there was the old female Flo with her raggedy ears and her bulbous nose, and she was just amazing. She was like my mother, a supportive mother. She would risk anything to go to the help of any of her children. And, you know, the chimp mother has her first baby at about 13 in the wild. Then she only has one child every 5 years. So they're not overpopulating. And there's high infant mortality too. Yeah. But when she has the second baby, the 5-year-old is still dependent on mum, traveling with mum, and getting stronger bonds with mum and with the new brother and sister. And then the next baby, the oldest one, is now 10. But that child will also spend time with the mother, although a bit less. Especially the males, they go off and they're now competing for dominance. But if anything happens and they get upset, they run back to mummy. So, you know, Flo was just amazing. And then her daughter Fifi became the next matriarch. The dominant female, and she was very special. And there's so many special ones. I just finished reading the first book I wrote, In the Shadow of Man, and soon it will be out there for people. I'm sitting here where I am now reading it, but we're illustrating it with photos that have never been seen before. Oh. And we're going to put out one chapter a week once it's done, because next week, on the 14th of July, is the anniversary of the first day I set foot on the shore of Gombe.
Wow, that's so wonderful. So we're going to celebrate with you. This is amazing.
And, you know, we planned, because of COVID messed it all up, but I was going to go around. We were going to have galas everywhere and do lots of fundraising. Well, we've had to put that on hold. But we can do a lot virtually like this. And it's also World Chimpanzee Day. Oh, okay. Because it was the anniversary day. So it's 14th of July is special. And there'll be lots out on the website. Lots.
That's great. So everybody's hearing this, and we'll try to put the link to your website as well. Some of the questions that are coming through is how can they be part of your program? So I don't know if you want to give advice on that, how to be part.
Very simple. I mean, we've got a global website, which is janegoodall.org. That's the whole thing. Then for the Roots and Shoots program, it's rootsandshoots.org. And Tara Golshan comes over to the UAE twice a year, and that's why it's growing. And I've been coming once a year. In fact, I was nearly in Abu Dhabi or Dubai. I can't remember which. When the lockdown came, I was near. I might have been still with you.
Oh, yeah, you could have got stuck with us in the Middle East. That would have been great.
Luckily, I'm here because here is all my stuff, and I've been able to. I've been busier and more exhausted here than I have been on my tours.
Yeah, I think we can all relate to that. It's like we're overdoing because we think we're at home and we can do so much, and we end up doing a lot more than we expected. Another question coming up, and I think you alluded to it in your talk, but maybe you can add more. These are young people. We have high school students, we have university students. So they're asking, how can they make an impact in a personal or a small community level? Like they don't have resources. So what can one person do within their own circle, especially under these conditions where everybody's under lockdown and cannot travel or go places?
Well, it's a bit hard, but let me just give an answer because we won't always be on lockdown. And there's things you can do on lockdown too. I mean, for example, our Roots and Shoots program in Cape Town in South Africa, there were a lot of people who had no jobs and they were starving actually. And my granddaughter is working with Roots and Shoots there, and her group was raising money and buying food and delivering it to the people who couldn't. So how you get involved, you say to yourself, okay, every single day, I make some impact on the planet, and I can choose what sort of impact I make. So I can choose what to buy. I can choose what to eat. I can ask, what will the consequences of my little choices be on future generations? And when you think about this, one of the things which anybody can do is to eat less or move to a plant-based diet. And why do I say that? One, because of the horrible cruelty of these intensive factory farms, but the impact on the environment is huge. So they've got to be fed. Billions have got to be fed. And you clear the environment to grow the grain. You use fossil fuel to get the grain to the animals, to the killing place, to the meat, to the table. Then water is becoming increasingly scarce, and you know all about scarcity of water where you live. But that's happening anywhere where there are droughts in the drier parts of the world. Fresh water is getting less, and to change vegetable to animal protein uses an awful lot of water. And then on top of that, during digestion, the animals make gas. We all do. It's part of digestion. And that's methane, and that's a really, really bad greenhouse gas. Luckily not as frequent as CO2, but it's a very bad one. So for all those reasons, for me, it was the cruelty.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. Absolutely. So another question came up asking you, what is better to keep animals in conservation parks and observe them and follow them, or to keep them in the wild and not in a conservation park?
Well, I think we have to do both these days. The situation is so grim. We're losing animals so fast, or different species becoming extinct all the time. People don't think about the effect of plants becoming extinct and little insects, but one little creature, one little plant, if it goes, maybe it's the main food source of another, and this can lead to a ripple effect. So a bad zoo is a very bad place to keep an animal. To have a wild animal as a pet is bad and wrong. To rescue an animal when maybe like our young chimps whose mothers have been shot for food, or because people want to catch the babies and sell them, a sanctuary for them, because you can't just put them back in the wild. You know, they need their mother, they need their family. So we look after them in sanctuaries, and a sanctuary can be a big space. It can provide the animals with everything they need. The wild is not always a safe place at all. There are some chimpanzees in parts of Africa where they hear the chainsaws coming, where there are hunters out with guns, where all over the place there are these wire snares, and the habitat is getting less and less as human populations grow and foreign companies come in, logging and mining. So you have to sometimes think of yourself in the position of an animal. So if I was a chimpanzee living in a place like that, where my future is really in jeopardy and I'm living a lot in fear, then I'll prefer to be in a good sanctuary or even a good zoo, because some zoos are getting really, really good.
Yeah. Which leads to the next question. Why did you choose to study chimpanzees? That's one of the questions from the audience.
I didn't. I would have studied any animal to be out in the wild in Africa. It was Louis Leakey who wanted me to study chimpanzees, because his theory, which is accepted now, that about 6 million years ago there was an ape-like, human-like creature, which was a common ancestor, and we've developed along this path, and the apes have developed along the other path. So Leakey was digging up the fossil remains of Stone Age humans, and he felt, well, if Jane sees behavior in chimps today and humans today that's similar or the same, maybe they brought it with them along these long evolutionary pathways. That gave him a better feeling for how early humans might have behaved, kissing, embracing, holding hands, patting one another, competing for dominance, you know, all the things I talked about.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, we are so similar. It's just that we don't pause and look, and we're not humble enough. We're very arrogant, thinking we are different, when what we share is so much more, so much more than what makes us different. So another question that came up, and actually I wanted to also add to this, is you being a woman, with how females are different from males in certain biological aspects, as simple as, you know, being pregnant or nursing. You have brought a fresh perspective on how we observe nature, a different perspective, and it's similar to diversity, to look at things from different angles. So the question, so that's amazing. You remind me of Evelyn Keller and writing about how having this new lens actually boosts science and society in general. And we tend not to value that as much. So the question is, what advice do you have to a young woman or a girl growing up to pursue her dreams? Yeah.
Okay, well, the advice I have is, one, don't try to be more like a man, because
yes.
men and women have different qualities, and the female qualities are very important. You've got to really, really want to do what you want to do, what you're dreaming about, because there's competition, there's lots of people, especially in the field of science, and you've got to compete with men who traditionally have taken that role, but women are moving more and more into more and more branches of science and everything. And you've got to be prepared not to give in. If you don't get there straight away, don't give up. So I've had young people crying because they want to do conservation, but their parents or their teachers want them to go into business to make money. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to advise them to go against their parents. That would be foolish. So what I say to them is, do what your parents want, be good at it, make the money, but you can still help conservation every single day. And when you get to a certain stage, you can switch. You can leave the business. You've made a success, and you can dive into conservation, be tremendously helpful. So, you know, the main advice is be yourself, work hard, compete. Don't try and get extra favors because you're a woman, but compete on an equal basis. I can do as well as you, if you can.
That's wonderful and great advice. You mentioned
what I love. There's a tribe in South Africa, and I forget which country. I think it's Ecuador. And their chief told me, he said, our tribe we think of as an eagle, and one wing is male and one wing is female. and only when the two wings are equal will our tribe fly high.
Wow, that's so beautiful.
Isn't it? I love it.
I'm going to quote you on that.
Please do.
Which brings me back to, you talked about redefining success and what success should look like going forward for our young generation. And I couldn't agree with you more about that. And just as a shout out to the audience, to add to what you offered of your new book coming out, I wrote a book called Redefining Success. If we can reverse self-hate, why can't we redefine success?
Yeah.
And so it's out there in English and in Arabic for the audience, for those who want to read. And I'll send you a copy via email.
Thank you.
Yes, please, I'd love your feedback.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thinking the same.
Exactly. And this is how united we all are, but we need to have our voices out there to share. Yeah. So one question that came from the audience, what wakes you up every morning? What keeps you motivated?
Well, I'm an extremely obstinate person, and there are an awful lot of people out there trying to smash down those of us who care about the environment, because they just want to make money and they want power. They're thinking about their next election campaigns or the profit that they make in their business, you know, the bottom line. And I'm going to fight them, and I'm going to fight them till the day I die. Absolutely. I'm not going to be knocked down. But it's really my passion. I love nature. I love animals. I care desperately about our children. And this is what keeps me going, because I was born with many gifts, but two especially useful. One that has been useful is a strong constitution, because I used to be traveling 300 days a year. You need to be pretty tough to do that. But secondly, I was given this incredible gift of communication with words, written and spoken. And that's when you realize that you've been given these gifts, then you must use them. Otherwise, you're squandering the gifts that you had. And as I look back, you know, I'm 86 now, and I look back over my life, and it just seems that everything that happened was meant to be. And I've just got this increased feeling that I'm here to do what I'm doing. That's why I'm here. So, you know, I don't know, some people believe in life after death. Other people don't. I do. And so, anyway.
That's amazing. So one last question before we take a group selfie. There's a way to do this where we all take a picture together and then we watch the movie. What are future projects you're thinking about within your organization or beyond?
Well, basically, we're trying to extend what we do. We'd like this Takari program that helps people find alternative ways of living. We'd like to extend that. It can go way beyond chimpanzees. It doesn't matter. It's just a way of empowering people. And other organizations do it too, but our way is a little bit different, and it's very, very holistic. So we want to develop that, and we are developing it. There's a book coming out about it. I want to grow roots and shoots. I want roots and shoots everywhere. And we're growing by collaborating with people. So you can't do it all alone. But there's wonderful groups of young people out there. And if we can link them all together, which through technology is getting more and more possible, then we have this critical mass of young people who will grow up understanding we need enough money to live. But when we live for money, or we live for power, then it starts going wrong. And you know, sometimes young people come up to me and say, I want to be famous like you, what must I do? And I say, you must not think that that's what you want to do. Do you think I wanted to be famous? Oh, absolutely not. If I'd known back then that I was going to be speaking to groups of people and this, that, and the other, I think I would have quit and gone home. I was very shy. But you don't seek fame. You live the life that you've been mapped out as well as you possibly can. Before we see the video, let me just say,
yes, please.
A video of a little chimpanzee who came to us when her mother had been shot, terribly badly wounded. So her name is Wunda, which in the local language means close to death. And a wonderful sanctuary manager in Congo brought her back to life. Then when she was about 9, she got desperately sick again, and again Rebecca rescued her. And the video that you see, will see, is when she's being moved out of the crowded sanctuary onto a big island which the government gave us. And the important thing to remember, I had not seen her until this day. This was the first day I saw her. And it illustrates this. I think that we can have a telepathic communication with animals. I've had it before, but what happened to me this day was something I will never forget as long as I live. So we can see that video now.
That's amazing. So would you give us one word of advice before we show the video, and then we can talk, you and I, right after the session?
Okay, well, the word of advice is remember that every day you live, you make an impact on the planet, and it's up to you to decide what sort of impact you want to make, which is what you buy, how you treat people, how you treat animals. Each single day, you make some difference.
Thank you so much, Jane. This was an amazing experience, I think, for everybody who's listening, who will listen later. I really, really appreciate it. And I look forward that we stay in touch, all of us, going forward and helping make this world a better place together. So I'm going to share the video now. And yeah, great.
Here it comes.
Yes, here we go.
This is a really exciting moment for me. The Jane Goodall Institute's Chimpunga Chimpanzee Rehabilitation Center in the Republic of Congo has for years been caring for infants whose mothers were killed, mostly for the illegal bushmeat trade. Many of them are now fully grown. Recently, we acquired 3 large forested islands on the beautiful Kwilu River, where we can release many of the chimpanzees from our overcrowded center. In here is Wunda, and she nearly died, but thanks to Rebecca, she came back from the dead. And here she is about to come out into this paradise. She's the 15th chimpanzee to get her freedom here. And we hope ultimately to have about 60 on the island. Today is the first time I've met Wunda. I talked to her on the boat, trying to reassure her. She must have wondered what was happening. None of us could predict exactly what she would do once the cage door opened. It was a very, very touching moment. One of the most amazing things that's ever happened to me. The warmth of her embrace is something I shall never forget. For Wunda and all the other chimpanzees we're working to bring here, Chinzula Island will provide a wonderful forest home where they will be cared for and safe.
Do you miss them?
Well, I think about them. They're a part of me. They're in here.
Yes. This is amazing. I mean, thank you so much for your time and sharing with us your experience and being part of this conference and a role model and exemplar to all our young people here in the Arab world and all over the world.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to share a message. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye to all of you listening.
Yes, everybody's listening, and hopefully people will take your advice to heart and go forward. And we wish you the best of luck and the best of health. Take care of yourself, and hopefully we'll stay in touch. Thank you very much.
Yes, and I hope lots of you will join us, and so we can all work together to make the world better, strengthen each other, support each other, and make what seems difficult possible.
Thank you. You made my year. Thank you very much.